nearing the start of hurricane season and already have one storm under our belts. What's the NOAA forecast for 2015? Stay tuned to find out in the May 28th edition of the Water Resources Outlook. So to start off, let's look at the past rainfall, and this is a past 30-day departure from normal, and areas that have received below normal rainfall include northern Alabama, we get to South Georgia, and then the eastern Carolinas near the mountains. The only places that we've really seen above normal rainfall are along coastal Carolina, the west coast of Florida, and then as we get into South Alabama. Otherwise, things are pretty close to normal over much of the rest of the southeast. Now, how does that reflect in the stream flows? Well, as you can see, especially in the eastern Carolinas, much of that area is showing below normal stream flow conditions. There are a few spots when we get into the western Carolinas where we're seeing a little bit above normal. Otherwise, most of the rest of the southeast is very close to normal, with a few above and a few below.
Okay, so let's review the flood climatology and also see that we're in the late spring and summer period where river flooding becomes much less frequent. We also notice that the impact from tropical systems typically comes towards the late summer and fall. River flooding becomes less dominant, but flash flooding becomes more prevalent in the summer. There's one exception, and that is in the Florida Peninsula, where the wet season begins in the summer and river flooding picks up. So we'll try to talk about summer flooding in the southeast and flash flooding in the next WRO.
So here's a quick look at the rainfall, the 7-day rainfall over the U.S. And as you can see, where we've continued to have heavy rainfall over Texas and Oklahoma and the Arkansas area, that will continue, but it looks like it will start to taper off after just a couple of days. But it looks like the heavier rain from that system will stay further to our north in Tennessee and won't impact our rivers in the southeast nearly what they have in Texas. Now, as you get into Florida, Central Florida and South Florida, it looks like in days 6 and 7, that's where we're going to look for our heavy rain. It's still a ways out, but it does look like we have some heavy rain possible during that time. As for the Carolinas, the western Carolinas near the mountains looks 2 inches of rain or so during this time. As we taper off, as we get a little closer to the coast, to near just under 1/10 of an inch as we get close to the coast. So not as much rain in that area for our first week. As for the second week, from June 4th through June 10th, it does look like some above normal chances for rainfall over Florida, South Georgia, South Alabama, and in those areas. And then as we move a little bit further north, a little bit less chance for the rainfall as we get just above in North Georgia, Northern Alabama, and South Carolina, and then just equal chances for below normal, near normal, or above normal as we're looking at North Carolina and Virginia. Yesterday, NOAA released its tropical season prediction for 2015, and right now for the Atlantic hurricane season, the outlook is for named storms to be around 6 to 11. Our hurricanes will be between 3 and 6, and major hurricanes between 0 and 2. So right now it looks like we'll have a below normal season based on all the factors going in, including El Nino, which we'll be talking about a little bit later.
Considering the tropical season is just upon us, let's go ahead and look at the climatology of tropical systems in the Atlantic Basin as well as the southeast United States. We see here the number of Atlantic Basin tropical storms from 1950 to 2014 in red, and the southeast tropical storms there in blue. And we can see that there are a number of years where the Atlantic Basin has been active, but the southeast U.S. had little activity, and vice versa. Look there at 1985, and we see we had 11 storms in the Atlantic Basin that year, but 8 of those storms affected the southeast. So just because we may see an inactive Atlantic Basin season with storms this year doesn't translate to a quiet southeast U.S. tropical season. So we'll also see the last 2 seasons have been pretty quiet for the southeast. But as we look here, on average, the southeast sees 1 to 4 storms each season. as you see in the chart, with the average around 2.8 storms a year. The number of years with 5 or more, you can see there, drops off considerably. There's been a lot of talk about El Nino and the lower number of storms in the Atlantic Basin during El Nino years, typically, but let's look at the number relative to the southeast, and we see here that yes, the numbers are lower, especially for moderate to strong El Ninos in the Atlantic, but we also see that for the southeast, the ENSO doesn't seem to matter as much. As you can see there in the red bars, pretty even, maybe a slight increase in La Nina, but most fall on the 2 to 4 storms a year.
So now that Jeff's talked about the climatology of the tropical season in the southeast, let's talk about ENSO history and kind of what it means looking to the past and maybe what we'll expect in the future. The red shows above normal Pacific ocean temperatures, and the blue shows below normal Pacific temperatures. And if we have a 3-month period or a set of periods where we have above normal, over a half a degree above normal, we have an El Nino, and the same is true if we have below normal, then we have a La Nina. And the last El Nino we had was back in 2009, and that was, it started kind of during the summer and then ended up coming through the fall and peaking sometime in that December or January time frame. So what does that mean coming up? Well, here's our forecast for this year and what we're expecting, and it's something similar. Now, it wasn't a real strong El Nino. We were getting close to a moderate El Nino, but in this particular case, just based on the forecast, we're looking at a moderate to strong El Nino during that time, forecasted for that time. Now, back then, when we had the forecasts, we were actually below normal for our sea surface temperatures and ended up getting into just above a half degree, right around 1 degree was our peak at that time. And again, as I mentioned before, it was in the December, January, and February time frame. But that fall was a very wet fall, even though we didn't have a real active hurricane season, or at least that impacted the southeast. We did have a very wet fall over a good chunk of the southeast. So what's our June outlook? Well, right now the Climate Prediction Center is predicting above normal for much of the southeast, with the exception of the North Carolina and Virginia, where they're expecting equal chances for below normal, near normal, and above normal, and that also includes far south Florida, that they're in that same predicament. Now, for the seasonal outlook, June through August, that equal chances dips down a little bit further, with Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, Virginia, a lot of it still being in equal chances, with above normal precipitation chances in northern Florida, central Florida, and through most of Alabama and South Georgia. So the bottom line, in the short term, it looks like we will have normal summertime rainfall with afternoon type thunderstorms from the heat of the day, and with plenty of moisture to work with, at least in the short term, over much of the southeast. As for the long term, the El Nino is here. We're officially in El Nino now, and it looks to stay weak for a while and then get stronger as we get deeper into hurricane season, which will help to dampen the hurricane season. Otherwise, because we're having an El Nino, we're expecting to be wetter than normal over most parts of the southeast as we move through the summer and into the fall. Thank you for listening to this Water Resources Outlook. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact either Jeff or I, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions. And look for our next Water Resources Outlook at the end of June.